Next thing we're going to cover is my knife drive. So that's on page 8 in my FD1 book and page 7 in my FD75 book. So right here at the top of the page, you can see it. Here's my knife drive. So what we're going to go over is checking the oil level and how to properly do that on your saw. I'm going to open up my side cover. I'm going to walk around to my knife drive here. And to check your oil level on this, or if you need to add oil, or when you service this, is you want to take, this is my vent plug here, and it's also my oil indicator. So I want this wobble box level. I do not want to fill this on the ground. If you fill this thing when it's on the ground, it's going to be over full. It's going to be venting oil out of here all the time. So all I have to do is take and loosen up this here. And down on the bottom of this little vent plug is actually my oil indicator for my level. So this one is actually over full. That oil level is way up here. That oil should only be up to this cut line. And this is the same on all FD1, FD75, 2162s, or FD70s. So someone probably overfilled this with the cutter bar on the ground, and now it's over full, and it's going to be venting oil. There was a bunch of oil around here already wiped off prior to opening this up. Next thing you're covering is my knife drive belt. So this is for FD1s, FD75s, 2162s. This is the same. So FD1 page 4, FD75 is on page 2. So flip to page 4 there. They say how you're supposed to check this is you put 30 pounds of force on this belt, and it's supposed to deflect no more than 5/16 of an inch. So what I use as a good rule of thumb is I go mid-span between my two pulleys. I grab that belt with my thumb and my index finger, and I should only be able to rotate that belt about a quarter turn. I want this belt fiddle string tight because it's a hydraulically driven system. So that way, if something gets in your cutter bar and causes your sickle to stall out, this belt doesn't slip. It goes over hydraulic relief protection on the pump over there at 3,500 PSI. So make sure you're keeping this belt tight. I don't want this belt slipping when you get something in your cutter bar. So just another side note is for you guys that aren't familiar with the MacDons or haven't run them before, is if you're running in the field and you take that cutter bar and you're going around your field and you come to the end of the field where you got headland rows and you run that cutter bar straight into a bunch of headland rows, a crop, and you're going 4 miles an hour or somewhere there about that speed, your knife will stall out. It's because of the way the hydraulic system's designed. It's going to shock load the system and it will stall it. There's nothing you can do to change the speed or pressure of the system. It's by design. It's to protect you from breaking guards and sections when something gets in your cutter bar. Another thing you want to check, brand new machine. This goes with all models. The first 10 hours, there's 2 bolts here, and then there's 2 bolts in from the bottom back here on this side, right on the bottom side here. So that information is on page 5 on your FD1 book and page 2 in your FD75 book. So like it shows in your book there, you want to put a torque wrench on here. These bolts are supposed to be torqued at 200 foot-pounds, and that's at 10 hours you need to check it on a new machine. And then every year I would put your wrench on there and make sure that them bolts are tight. If these bolts come loose, by the time you realize that's come loose, you're going to probably have destroyed this wobble box and this frame on the header here. This wobble box is over $3,000, and then you're going to have a lot of labor involved and replacing this weldment on this header. So make sure that you're checking these bolts before season starts. And continuing on, the next thing I'm going to cover is talk about my knife drive pin here. So that is on page 11 in my FD1 book and page 5 in my FD75 book. So my knife pin right here, here's my decal for that. So I'm just going to take and stroke this over here. So this Zerk here gets no more than 2 pumps every 25 hours. Do not over grease this. If you over grease this, this knife head floats on this pin. What'll happen is it'll take and the grease will fill up the cavity, and it's going to deflect this knife head right off this pin. Just like if you were putting hydraulic oil in a cylinder, it's going to push it down off there. You over grease this, and you're probably going to bust your knife head off in here at the end of the casting where it's connected to your sickle. So make sure you don't over grease it. If you do over grease it, take the Zerk out, push the knife head up, put the Zerk back in, give it 1 pump of grease. So this is something that's not in your book. How do you properly service this? If you want to take your sickle out, put your spare sickle in. This one does have a spare sickle, it's been used. So to properly do that is you take your zerk out first. If you don't take the zerk out, when you try to pry the pin out after you loosen your pinch bolt, it'll actually hydrolock and it'll suck that pin right back down in there. So take the zerk out, take the pin out. After you've loosened the pinch bolt, pull your sickle out, rebuild your sickle. Once you've got all your service done, to properly reinstall this is I take and I hold my knife head up tight against my pitman arm, and I slowly tap down on this pin until I get a fingernail gap between this knife head and this pitman arm, and then I tighten my pinch bolt, and then I put my zerk back in. That's how you properly service your knife head. If you put the pin in too far, it's going to deflect the knife down just like if you over-greased it, and it's going to lead to knife head breakage. Next, we're going to cover my guards and hold downs. So that's on page 10 in my FD1 book and page 5 in my FD75 book. You want to keep these down, adjusted down tight. If you don't keep these adjusted down tight, it allows the sickle to lift up and it's going to round off this corner of these guards. Like these guards are worn off. So you want to keep that edge nice and sharp. I got a guard here that's in pretty good shape, condition. Keep that sharp. It's going to give you a lot cleaner cut when you're cutting them green stem beans. It's going to reduce the amount of cutter bar shatter that you have when you're starting out early in the season in green stem beans. I use a piece of banding strap material. It says a 1/2-inch banding strap if you ever get something shipped to you. So I use that as a gauge. I want to keep that, so this spec is supposed to be 4 to 24 thousandths. So all I have to do is adjust this bolt back here. If I tighten this bolt, it's going to tip my hold down and keep my sickle pushed down tight against my guard there. So you want to keep that so it's nice and snug. Here's another one right here. This one is really loose too. So I got that one snugged up there too. So on a MacDon, there's different style of guards. So this is basically what we call a non-ledger guard. There's no bar to keep that sickle from pushing back. So this is my first guard on my left-hand end over here. So that guard's going to go right in that position. Then I'm going to have a guard that's going to go all the way down on the right-hand end of the header. That's this guard right here. And then the next 3 guards after my stubby guard there on the end are non-ledger guards, like this left one here in my hand. Here's the ledger guard in my right hand. So the next 3, 1, 2, 3 are non-ledgers, and then I have a ledger guard. If you put a ledger guard in this position right here, you're probably going to bust your knife head off right here, because as the sickle strokes out, it strokes back. As it strokes in, it strokes back, and it's going to do that over 1,200 times a minute. It's going to stress this right here. It's going to break your sickle bar right here.